Hi, kids. We're out harvesting the last 6 or 8 acres approximately of big 270-acre fields. I told Brenda this morning that I'm feeling pretty blessed to be able to do this today, because when I woke up this morning early and came out, the field conditions or atmosphere conditions were such that I kind of thought that combining soybeans was going to be pretty difficult. But about 9:30, we gave it a shot, and it seemed to be working okay. And this monitor up here will tell you that the moisture for what I prefer to harvest these soybeans at is perfect, around 13%. This morning they were 14.5 or so, and that's kind of pushing it for being able to keep soybeans stored in a bin long term. So we're happy to see that moisture down. I know that it was raining this morning, not very far from us to the east, and it was just cool and damp this morning. And sometimes when those conditions exist, it makes it really difficult for the plants themselves to be pulled into the combine evenly and effectively, be able to be thrashed and remove the seeds from all the pods. So this on the front of our combine is what they call a soybean draper head. It cuts the plants and lays them on a belt on each side that are rotating to the center. And there's a center belt that pulls that crop. You can kind of see right through that gap in between the pipe and the bar where the numbers and the letters are. That's the entire 35-foot of cut that the head makes, and pulls it into the machine, which the machine has a big rotating drum that the crop passes through with little holes around the outside, that all those soybean seeds get dropped out of the pods into a shaker pan that blows air across them and cleans them out. And then an auger and a conveyor pull the seed up into the bin. And Brenda, it's perfect time probably to look at, that's what's being harvested, is all those little soybeans that are getting put in my grain hopper. And I hope, maybe not this round, but the next round, a tractor and a grain cart will pull up beside us, and then I will be able to dump those soybeans into the grain cart while I continue to harvest. So
let's take a look at your steering wheel.
Yep.
You can see no hands. Tell them why that's possible.
So we use what the acronym is GPS. It stands for Global Positioning Systems. It's originally a military device. So there's satellites out in space that can track where I'm going and where I've been, and then also, therefore, with some amazing technology, be able to steer my combine in a perfectly straight line so that I don't need to focus on not getting enough crop or getting too much crop or having gaps in the field and stuff like that. So what that allows me to do is focus on some of the other things that I've got to make sure my combine is adjusted correctly for, so that I'm not missing crop or blowing crop out the back of my combine. We want to get as much of it in the bin as possible, obviously. So, and then this monitor here is primarily for combine operation. This monitor up here is more for yield. So this tells me what my crop is yielding right now. It shows me where I'm at, where I've been, and I can zoom in and zoom out and make all kinds of decisions for next year on how to do things better, different, or what worked, what didn't work. We can keep track of different varieties of crop that maybe one did a little better than the other, and I'll plant more of that one next year, and all kinds of things.
And all that information is stored for you, so
Correct.
that you can review it over the winter time.
Correct. So amazingly enough, end of the year, all my harvest information gets stored on this little thing right here. Then I can take it home and put it on my computer, analyze it. I can send it and email it to other experts across the country that are good at what they do and can advise me on what to do differently or better. And yeah, in the last 10 to 15 years, farming has become pretty amazing when it comes to what kind of technology that we use to make better choices and try new things and keep track of what we did and not forget, oh yeah, did I put this there? Or because this computer goes from my planner to my sprayer to my combine, and it keeps track of everything that I do. So at the end of the year, I can overlay all that information and we can make good decisions for next year.
So can you tell them where we are?
Yeah, I'm a half mile straight east of the original home place, which is about 4.5 miles east of Clemmy. So from you guys, we're south to Clemmy and east 4 miles.
And when you say the home place,
Yeah.
what does that mean?
Well, that means that's where I was born and raised. That's where my dad first moved home to farm. I'm we think probably a 5th generation farmer, but for sure a 4th generation farmer. My great grandpa and my grandpa, Renner, moved up here from Nebraska during the Dust Bowl because they didn't have enough feed to feed their cows. So they came to North Central Iowa and started working as hired men for other farmers, and slowly but surely started to own and operate their own land and equipment. And this is where we ended up. So I'm getting lined up here with my next pass, turning on the head. One button will drop that head exactly where it needs to go, as close to the ground as possible. And then another button engages the steering so that all I have to do is focus on, whoop, it didn't grab that line. So technology is great when it works, and it doesn't always work. So you got to be ready to take over when it doesn't let you do what you want. And I might know why, because I set a different line. So it may not grab on where we want it. And if it doesn't, that's fine too. We'll see if it goes this way first. Yeah, I think it'll work now.
So who's involved? Who helps you with harvest?
I've got a lot of good part-time labor, some neighbors, some friends that have, most of them either have full-time jobs and take vacation time to help us, or they're retired and they don't have a full-time job and they just like to be out on the farm and help us out. As long as we can communicate and keep a schedule, it works really well, and be a little bit flexible and adjustable with weather. And that's kind of how I get by. And then probably my biggest and most help is still my father. He says he's retired, but he's really not. He comes out every day and makes sure we keep going and helps me with decisions and maintenance and all kinds of things that we got to do from day to day.
So what's everybody's job? Are you the combine driver all the time?
Actually, typically no. So soybeans, just because of their sheer volume and yield per acre, soybeans, we're happy with a 60 to 70 bushel yield per acre, which means it goes a little bit slower paced. We don't have to keep quite as many trucks on the road. So it's kind of a joy for me to be able to combine, because typically I'm in a semi truck, trucking corn to the home place to dry. And I kind of feel like I'm the only one that knows how to operate the dryer efficiently. So that gives me an opportunity to keep an eye on the dryer. When we run soybeans, they typically go right into a bin. We don't need to dry soybeans, hopefully. I've heard that some people have had to do that this year, and I don't like that thought. But that aside, we just, when corn yields 220 to 260 bushels per acre, it takes more trucks to keep that operation going. So I've got a good part-time helper that has a good experience in the combine, and I trust to make the right decisions and adjustments in the combine on the go, kind of. And he does a majority of our combining. My dad does a fair amount of combining as well, but typically my dad and I truck the corn away from the field. We've got a part-time helper in the combine and a part-time helper in the grain cart, keeping the corn away from the combine. So that's kind of how we roll.
Okay, this is not smoke coming up here, right?
No, that's bean, I call it fuzz, but it's bean dust. It's why they haven't been able to breed a soybean that doesn't have as much dust to it, I don't know. But if you would see me in the mornings, I'd be covered in that stuff head to toe, because each morning and we take engine air filters out of our tractors and for sure the combine, and they're packed full of that stuff. Probably the best example of what my air filters look like, or that spot right where the hoses disappear. It just builds up. It's a dusty fuzz that sticks to everything. And unfortunately, it can do not only damage to things, but also lead to, it's flammable. If something gets hot on my combine, it can start a fire. So there's lots of things to keep an eye on and try to keep clean to avoid any disasters or downtime, especially this year. So
you grow corn and soybeans.
Correct.
How many total acres do you have between you?
So this particular year, my rotation is about 800 acres of soybeans and about 1,200 acres of corn. Next year, just because of economics and input prices and different things, it looks like I'm going to be closer to a 50-50 rotation, where I'll have about 1,000 acres of each. Excuse me.
So tell them what inputs are. What do you mean when you say input?
So my inputs are everything it takes to grow a crop. First, you need land, right? Soil, and some we own. Some I own personally, but it's not paid for. I'm still paying a mortgage on that land or a note. So there's that cost. Some we rent from somebody else that owns the land, and there's that cost. So you got to start with that, and then you move on to what I call seed, fertilizer, chemical. You got to have seed to plant in the ground. You got to have fertilizer that feeds that crop throughout the growing season, and you have to have chemicals to keep the weeds out and the pests out, sometimes bugs. So from what we're hearing and seeing, the not only costs is going up, but also the availability of those inputs might be at a premium next year. It's going to be difficult to get them. And so even though we're still harvesting last year, we're kind of forced to not look back too much, and we've got to start looking forward to next year and make some decisions so that we know how to treat the ground and get prepared for next year's crop already, even though it's still 2021.
So do you have livestock?
We do. I have about 14 head of cows that I own with a neighbor and friend, and they have calves every spring. In fact, I don't know if we can see them, but they're right over there.
Right over there.
See the cow? I don't know if they can zoom in on that or not, but yeah, they are out in the pasture right now. And the calves are already weaned from the cows, so they're at the home place. And we already have somebody that is going to buy those calves from us. And that will happen here after harvest. And then we will move the cows home for the winter off the pasture, obviously. There won't be any grass growing out there when the snow flies. And they are with a bull, so if they're not bred, they will be bred and have calves again next spring. We do not have any hogs at the moment, but we do have access to the fertilizer that the hogs produce. And we also happen to be lucky enough to be in the same field that's happening right now. And there again, I'm not sure if we'll be able to see it or not, but there's a tractor and a tillage implement tool that is dragging a big hose that's pumping the manure, which to me is fertilizer, out of that barn that's clear up in front of us about a half mile onto this farm. So we're accomplishing a couple things at once here today. We're finishing harvest of soybeans, and we're already delivering next year's fertility to the soil so that the corn has something to feed off of.
And is that fertilizer an input for you? Does that cost you, or
So
does the farmer pay you to take that fertilizer?
got it. So every situation's a little different. In this case, I don't pay directly for that fertilizer, but I do pay the gentleman that owns the equipment to have it delivered. So a lot of people try to base the manure value off of cost of fertilizer, which can be done, but it can be tricky too, because sometimes fertilizer is cheaper than it costs to deliver the manure. So, and to compare the two is a little difficult because sometimes, well, not sometimes, all the time, people think that a natural form of fertilizer like manure actually can produce more bushels per acre than commercial fertilizer. So now we have one of our hired helpers, one of my part-time workers, my neighbor Dan, pulled up beside me in the tractor in the grain cart so that I can continue to harvest in front of me, but push a little button on my hydrostat over here, and down comes the spout, and down comes the beans.
That's the nice thing about having extra help. You don't have to stop. You can keep driving the combine. He's driving the tractor. You don't have to stop to unload if you were doing both jobs, right?
That's correct. And one little new feature that we got on our farm this year, even though currently, I think I told you, technology is great when it works. It's not working right now, but we're hoping to get it figured out. There's some Wi-Fi issues. I know all you kids are probably familiar with Wi-Fi, but I have the equipment capable of making that tractor talk to my combine, and then my tractor operator doesn't need to steer either. It snaps a line beside my combine, and he can push a button in his cab, and it steers itself the perfect distance away from my combine so that the crop always falls into that wagon. Like I said, unfortunately, there's a Wi-Fi antenna issue that we haven't been able to resolve yet. We're hoping to have that resolved by the time we get done with soybeans and switch to corn. But so there's pretty amazing technology in just about every piece of equipment that we run or that we own.
Okay, Jackson and Bentley want to know, what brand of equipment do you like to use?
So I really am not extremely partial to any brand. I know that you guys have noticed that we have a red combine and a red tractor with a grain cart on it. I do own a few pieces, smaller pieces that don't get used as much, that are manufactured by John Deere. I shouldn't say that. My sprayer, even though it's yellow and it's called a Hagie, that company is actually owned and made by John Deere now. So we've got a little bit of everything on our farm. I will say that it becomes, I think, with all this technology, it can become more and more difficult to mix and match pieces of equipment and different types of equipment, because sometimes the technology doesn't talk to each other very well. But for the most part, I'm pretty flexible. I obviously want to run the equipment that makes the most economic sense for me to run at the time. So.
Leah would like to know, is it looking like a good year for yield?
It is. It's looking like, kind of, especially for the crop that we're harvesting right now, I have seen some of the best bean yields that I've ever seen in my life. And in one case, a yield that I didn't even know was possible, especially this year, because you guys remember, we've been extremely dry. So soybeans like rainfall in August, and we did not have a lot of rainfall in August. We did have, I think, some spotty showers and rainfall amounts towards the end of August, but for whatever reason, one particular bean field responded really well to the year that it was given. I think that particular farm is typically a poor drain farm. It doesn't have as much or very good drainage for field tile. And because it was so dry, and that farm is typically so wet, I think that was a good combination to have this year.
Trinity wants to know if you ever missed a row when you're combining.
Well, I'd like to say I never have, but it does happen. We usually give my dad a hard time when that happens. So soybeans are a little different than corn, obviously, as you can tell. I'm combining these at a little bit of an angle. I think the cutter bar does a better job of harvesting every plant if it's always kind of changing direction and running at an angle. Corn, obviously, we can't do that because the plants are pulled down individually, one at a time, and stripping those plants of the ear. And the only way we can tell where we're at in a field is if somebody doesn't plant straight. There's what we call a point row, or a narrow row or a wide row. And sometimes if somebody plants really straight the entire farm, it's really hard to know where to go in with an 8-row corn head on a 16-row planter. So at times you do end up with one row left, and then you got to go all the way across the farm. Now here's an example right here where obviously it's not one row, but it's probably what, 10 feet out of 35 that my head is capable of taking. And the reason that happened is my guidance line was different on the right than it was on the left. The last person that combined this farm wasn't me, and he had a different line in his combine than I did. So, but he had to finish somewhere. It's not that big of a deal. This monitor is capable of recording exactly what I do, no matter when or if what you're asking about happens. So if it's harvesting 1 row, 10 rows, and it should be harvesting 20 rows, it doesn't matter. It's going to tell me the width that I'm harvesting and the yield per acre that it's making. So.
And you can see when Brent gets to the end of this row, he's done with this field.
Yeah.
Tell them what that means to you.
That means that when I woke up this morning, I wasn't sure I was going to get done with soybeans before it rains. It looks like for sure on Wednesday it's going to rain. And it looks like there's a good chance I can. If not, get finished with all my soybeans tonight. We've only got one farm left, 70 acres south of Clear Lake. So it means we're going to be moving here pretty soon. And it means that there's a possibility that I could get done with all my soybean harvests before it rains on Wednesday. And then it's not as, the conditions for corn aren't as critical as they are for soybeans. So if it rains on Wednesday, I might be harvesting corn on Thursday. But usually with soybeans, if it gets rain or if there's conditions that feel like rain even, soybeans absorb moisture differently than corn does, and it just makes it a lot more difficult to harvest. So we're looking forward to being done with soybean harvest.
So when you say you're going to be moving,
Yep.
What does that mean exactly? Like,
so the first thing I'll do, and we can do it together if we've got time, we're going to take the bean head over to a cart and lay it on a cart because the head doesn't too wide to go down the road on the combine. So we will move the head and the combine separately to the next field, and we got to put the head back on the combine when we get there. And I've got to move the grain cart and 2 semis and people. So moving from field to field can kind of be a big job sometimes, depending on how far we're going. And I'm going to have to move an auger to a new farm and set that up at a different pen because it's a different variety of soybeans. We raise seed beans, so that means that these beans are going to be put in a bin And this winter sometime, Pioneer or Syngenta, which are the two companies that I receive for, will come get them out of the bin, take them to their plants or their facility, and clean them and bag them and sell them to farmers to plant next year.
So how are seed beans, how is it different raising seed beans than just regular beans?
The biggest thing is you need to make sure that when you plant, your planter is completely free of any other seed. And then when you harvest, you need to make sure that your combine, your grain cart, your semis, everything needs to be completely cleaned out. One kernel of corn in my soybeans can lead to a rejection, which then means I don't get paid a premium for my crop. They're always going to be worth the same price as soybeans because they're still soybeans. But I sign a contract with the company that wants this soybean for seed to make sure I do all these things to make sure that there can't be any corn in the field. There can't be any kernels of corn in our equipment that contaminate a bin, or it can be rejected, and then I don't get that premium. And that
Is that?
That is it for this field.
What's your favorite part of farming?
I love working outdoors. I love watching things grow, whether it's plants or animals. You know, earlier somebody asked about yield. Brenda and I were talking before we went live with you guys. I'm hearing from a lot of friends and neighbors, not just close, but across the state. We've all been pleasantly surprised with how well things yielded this year. Unfortunately, I've been on the other side of that. You can be surprised the other way. I remember going into a soybean field about 10 years ago, so excited to harvest because they looked phenomenal and they were at best average, if not a little below average. So there's always the unknown of that type of thing. And I like working with family and still work with my dad. So that's enjoyable. And you guys may or may not know that your favorite elementary secretary, Nikki, Miss Nikki, is my wife, and she is involved with our operation and takes care of book work and bill paying and stuff like that. So yeah, it's a fun occupation to be involved in.
And I don't know if you guys can see this, and I don't know how much time you have left either, but we're heading up to the
Head cart.
yeah, it's a cart.
Trailer.
I lost the word for it.
It's all right.
Okay. So maybe you can see. So the head doesn't fold down or anything. It's just that you're going to put it on here and then
Correct.
it can be
Taken down the road lengthwise instead of widthwise.
right. And does that all happen in here too?
Nope. I need to go outside and detach a few things. So we can go do that and I'll show
Okay.
them exactly. I get my spot, put the brake on. So before we leave, if you want to show them this, now I'm anxious to see this. These are my final numbers for this 270 acres of farm ground. So it yielded 68 bushel to the acre. The average moisture across the entire farm was 13.4. That's how many acres I combined in this field. That's the entire weight of the crop that I harvested, and that's the entire bushels that I harvested. And since I put a lot of this in a bin, but not all of it, I kind of mentally, for me, it's nice to see those things at the end of the field to kind of verify that something's not wrong or broken, or, you know, that's what I was anticipating it to tell me, and that's good to know. This is the electrical. This is the power takeoff. Oh, PTO shaft. It can be a little difficult. And then this is the safety that keeps the head on the combine. There's little pins that latch it. You drop that down. This goes up. Over here goes up. There's two more things on the other side I got to do just like that.
Back the combine away and the bean head will stay on the cart.